I arrived at my parents' house in the morning for our family trip, but only a golden retriever was there. Then, my phone rang. We're off on a cruise. Take care of the dog. My sister laughed next to them. Don't worry, we'll bring you back a special gift. When they returned, they stepped inside and froze in pure terror. Carol Hamilton gazed out the window, preparing herself mentally for the day ahead. She picked up her smartphone and checked her work emails. Despite it being Sunday morning, 3 urgent messages had already arrived. I'll deal with those later, she muttered quietly as she pulled her hair back into a ponytail. After 15 years as a real estate consultant, her reputation was unshakable. Clients valued her sharp analytical skills and decisiveness, and her name had become a brand in the Los Angeles real estate market. Her husband Michael spotted Carol from the bedroom and smiled gently. Are you ready for today? Carol shrugged. Just like always. It'll be a perfect family day with my mother, father, and sister. Michael didn't miss the sarcasm in her voice. He stood beside her and put his arm around her shoulder. They had chosen not to have children, prioritizing their careers and enjoying their freedom instead. However, Carol's family, especially her mother Martha, didn't understand this choice. Just look at Diana, was Martha's typical refrain. Carol's sister Diana, 4 years younger, was the perfect daughter in her mother's eyes. She worked at a travel agency, always obeyed her mother, and never missed family events. In contrast, Carol was labeled a workaholic and often missed family gatherings because of work. How long will you stay today? Michael asked. As brief as possible, Carol answered honestly. I'll be back by evening at the latest. I have an important meeting tomorrow. Michael kissed Carol's forehead. You'll manage fine. I'll be working all day but should be home for dinner. Carol returned a grateful smile. Michael understood the complexity of her family relationships, a strange mixture of love and obligation. While driving, Carol thought about her father, George. Since retiring, he spent his time gardening and fishing. He was a mild-mannered, quiet man who often remained in Martha's shadow. George was proud of Carol's success but never expressed it in front of his wife and younger daughter. When Carol was a child, her role in the family was clear. She was the responsible one. She watched over young Diana when their parents were busy working. She maintained excellent grades at school and helped with chores at home. Her personal wishes and dreams were always secondary to the family's needs. Turning left onto Sunset Boulevard, Carol entered the upscale neighborhood where her childhood home stood. It was a 2-story house with a spacious yard and old-fashioned charm inherited from her grandparents. But there was a fact few people knew: legally, the house was under joint ownership between Carol and her parents. Her grandfather had wisely arranged for the family property to be passed securely to the next generation. Carol rarely thought about this. Securely to the next generation. Carol rarely thought about this fact. In her mind, it was just the house where her parents lived and managed. She was content with her career and current life. But occasionally, her dormant sense of ownership would awaken. Parking in the driveway, Carol took a deep breath. Today's family trip had been planned by Martha weeks ago. To strengthen family bonds, Martha had said. Carol had inwardly sighed but agreed to participate as promised. Before she could ring the doorbell, eager barking came from inside the house. At least one welcoming presence awaited her. Buddy, the family's golden retriever. Carol smiled slightly. Perhaps today wouldn't be so bad after all. When she touched the doorknob, it was unlocked. Carol entered and called out, "I'm here." There was no answer. Instead, Buddy came bounding from the hallway, greeting her enthusiastically. "Mom? Dad?" Carol called out again. Beyond Buddy wagging his tail happily at her feet, the house was oddly silent. 8:15. Carol checked her watch. She had arrived precisely at the meeting time for the family trip as promised. Martha had said on the phone, "Everyone will gather at 8 in the morning, and we'll have breakfast before departing." Diana? Carol peered into the living room. Morning sunlight was streaming in, gently illuminating the antique figurines Martha cherished. But there was no sign of anyone. Heading to the kitchen, she found the coffee maker stopped with half a pot of coffee. It was still warm, indicating someone had been there recently. Buddy followed her around, occasionally whining to get her attention. "What is it, Buddy? Do you know where everyone went?" Carol spoke to the dog as she began climbing the stairs. Her parents' bedroom door was open. The bed was neatly made, but Martha's makeup was scattered across her vanity table, an unusual sight for her typically meticulous mother. The adjacent guest room, Diana's room, was similarly empty. Carol began to feel uneasy. Had there been an emergency? But if so, why hadn't anyone contacted her? She checked her smartphone again, but there were no new messages. When she returned downstairs, Buddy was waiting for her by the front door, staring at her as if he wanted his collar and leash put on. "Want to go for a walk?" Carol asked. "But I need to find the family first." At that moment, her smartphone started ringing. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. Carol sighed with relief and answered. "Mom, where are you? I arrived at the house, but nobody's." "Carol," Martha's cheerful voice rang out. In the background, Carol could hear the sound of waves and people laughing. "Switch to video call." Confused, Carol switched to video. The screen showed her parents and Diana standing on the deck of a cruise ship. All three were wearing sunscreen and sunglasses, already in vacation mode. "Surprise!" they shouted in unison. Carol was speechless. She felt her expression rapidly changing, from confusion to understanding, and gradually to anger. "What's going on?" she asked quietly, but with evident anger in her voice. "We're setting off on a cruise," Martha said excitedly. 2 weeks in the Caribbean. Diana found a special discount. "But you know, there were only reservations for 3 people. And since you said you were busy with work," George cut in, glancing slightly at his wife. "We didn't want to bother you." Carol tried to comprehend their words. "So you decided to leave without telling me? But who called me for a family trip?" "Oh, about that," Martha said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Actually, we wanted you to take care of Buddy. Dogs aren't allowed on cruise ships, and he would hate a pet hotel, wouldn't he?" "Take care of the dog," Diana said, laughing in the video. She seemed either unaware of Carol's anger or indifferent to it. "And don't worry, we'll bring you a special gift." Carol was at a loss for words. This was her family, making decisions based on their own convenience, always expecting Carol to accommodate their plans. It was a pattern unchanged since childhood. "When will you be back?" Carol finally managed to ask. "In 2 weeks, Martha said happily. "I've sent the details by email. Buddy's food is in the storage cabinet, and he needs walks twice a day. Oh, and Mrs. Jones next door will check in occasionally." Carol looked at Buddy, who gazed up at her, innocently wagging his tail. She took a deep breath. "All right," she said calmly. "Have a good time. Thank you. You're always so reliable." Martha said. "Bye. Now." The ship is about to depart. After the video call ended, Carol sank onto the sofa. Buddy put his head on her lap, looking up at her with comforting eyes. "It's just you and me, Buddy," she whispered. Anger and betrayal swirled within her. Carol stood up and walked to the bookshelf in the living room. As if guided by something, she pulled out an old document file. Inside was the deed to the house. She reviewed the papers, confirming the house was indeed under joint ownership between her and her parents. Her smartphone rang again. This time, it was from Michael. "How's it going? Has the family trip started?" His voice was cheerful. Carol explained the situation. Michael's sigh was audible over the phone. "That's terrible. Are you coming home?" Carol looked out the window, then at Buddy, who sat faithfully by her side. "No," she said slowly. "I have some thinking to do." After ending the call, Carol began searching for a lawyer's phone number. Her years of experience as a real estate consultant had given her an idea. "Buddy," she smiled at the dog. "Let's start a new life together." Buddy barked happily, as if understanding her words. Carol opened her laptop and began researching the latest real estate market data. There was a determined glint in her eyes. "This will be a gift from the abandoned," she whispered. Carol took a sip of coffee and stared at her laptop screen. For the past 3 days, she had been staying at her parents' house, formulating a plan. Buddy was sleeping contentedly at her feet. Outside the window, the gentle spring sunshine illuminated the beautiful view of the Silver Lake district. "James, this is the price I'm thinking of," Carol said on the phone. The person on the other end was her longtime colleague, now one of the most highly regarded real estate attorneys in Los Angeles. "I want to set it slightly below market value. Quick sale is important." "I understand, Carol." James's voice resonated from the phone. Since it's jointly owned property, you legally have the right to proceed with the sale. Just don't forget you need to notify the other owners. Yes, of course. Carol smiled. I'll send the notification when they return from their cruise. After ending the call, Carol stroked Buddy's head. Let's find a new home. Her apartment wasn't spacious, but it was sufficient for her, Buddy, and the necessary belongings. However, in the long term, she was considering a house with a backyard. Buddy needed a place to run around. Carol stood up and began walking through the house. It contained over 30 years of memories, some happy, some bitter. Family photos adorned the walls, her graduation, Diana's birthday parties, her parents' anniversary. On the surface, they looked like the perfect family. Entering the study, Carol opened the drawer of her father's old desk where important documents were kept. She made copies of the house deed and scanned them to send to James. She had also gathered the house's appraised value, property tax records, and recent sale prices of neighboring properties. As a real estate consultant, she knew this market intimately. Over the next 3 days, she prepared to put the house on the market. She arranged for photography and created promotional materials for potential buyers. Thanks to her professional network, everything progressed surprisingly quickly. While cleaning and organizing the house, she received a message from her mother. Attached was a photo of the three of them smiling against a backdrop of blue sea. The message read, "Having a wonderful time. How's Buddy?" Carol sighed. She replied simply, "Buddy is fine." And as she stared at the photo, a firm resolve grew in her heart. On the 4th day, the first potential buyers visited, the Wilson family, a husband and wife with 2 children, aged 10 and 8. They seemed drawn to the house's spaciousness and atmosphere, especially the backyard and the living room with its fireplace. "Perfect for this family," Carol told Buddy after they left. "The 2 children will play with you." That evening, she received an offer from the Wilson family. It was slightly higher than her asking price. They liked the house and had offered favorable terms early to avoid competition. Carol accepted the offer and asked James to prepare the purchase agreement. "That was remarkably quick," she said, sitting on the sofa with Buddy. "But I think this is the right thing to do." The next day, Carol began sorting through the house's mementos. She packed her personal items, childhood photos, and keepsakes into boxes. The rest of the family's belongings went into separate labeled boxes. She rented a storage unit nearby to store them for when the family returned. "Should I throw this away?" she wondered, holding an old photo album. It contained pictures of her and Diana as children, rare moments when they actually appeared to get along. After hesitating briefly, she placed it in her own box. As the closing date approached, Carol prepared to live with Buddy in her condominium. She confirmed the pet-friendly policy and bought a bed and dishes for Buddy. Martha sent photos and messages almost daily. "Coming home soon. Can't wait to be back home." Carol read these but didn't reply. Instead, she focused on the sale proceedings. The day before closing, the final documents were completed. Carol signed at James's office and made arrangements to hand over the keys to the Wilson family. She was calm, but complex emotions swirled inside her. This wasn't just revenge, it was an act of reclaiming her own life. "We're moving tomorrow," she told Buddy. The dog responded to her tone, wagging his tail. The next morning, Carol made a final visit to her parents' bedroom. She placed a small card on the pillow. It read, "A gift from the abandoned." Her phone rang. It was a message from her mother. "Coming home tomorrow. Can you pick us up at the airport?" Carol read the message but didn't reply. Instead, she placed another card on the kitchen table with information about the storage facility where her parents' and Diana's belongings were kept. She also attached an invoice for the storage fees. "Not exactly cheap," she chuckled softly. At noon, Carol stood in front of the front door. Buddy was on his leash, waiting beside her. The Wilson family's car appeared on the road. They had come to receive the keys to their new home. "Mrs. Hamilton, thank you so much," Mrs. Wilson said with a smile. Her husband was waiting in the car with their 2 children. "This house will be the place for our new beginning. It's for a wonderful family." Carol smiled as she handed her the keys. "Please take good care of it." "Of course," Mrs. Wilson promised. She looked up at the house and around the garden. "It's the perfect place for our children to grow up." Carol walked to her car with Buddy. She looked back one last time at the house. There was sentimentality, but no regret. "Well, Buddy," she said, Our new life begins now. Getting into the car, Carol took a deep breath. She checked the folder containing the title transfer documents, the storage contract, and all evidence of her plan. Everything was in order. She started the engine and drove away. In the rearview mirror, she saw the Wilson family entering the house. Their children were running around excitedly. A new family was beginning to create new memories. Arriving at her apartment, Carol carried in Buddy's things and her own essentials. Her apartment was cozy but clean, bright, and big enough for Buddy. The window offered a view of downtown Los Angeles. "Our castle, Buddy," she said. "At least for now." That evening she had dinner with Michael. She told him everything that had happened. He was surprised but understood and supported her actions. "I'd like to see their reaction when they get back," Michael said, laughing. Carol smiled. "I don't want to see it, but I can imagine it." That night, Carol lay in bed with Buddy and felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. After their 2-week Caribbean cruise, a taxi carrying Martha, George, and Diana entered the quiet residential area of Silver Lake. Their faces were tanned and relaxed. Their suitcases were full of souvenirs. "It was a wonderful vacation," Martha sighed. "Thank you for your connections, Diana." Diana smiled proudly. "That's the advantage of working at a travel agency. But I feel a bit bad about Carol." "She'll understand," Martha waved her hand. "Besides, we bought her that special souvenir." "Yes," George said, looking out the window. "But I'm a little concerned that we haven't heard back from her." "She's busy as usual," Martha shrugged. "And she's probably had her hands full taking care of Buddy." The taxi slowly pulled up in front of their house. George noticed first. "The garden looks different," he murmured. The front yard's plants, always perfectly maintained, had changed somewhat. New flowers had been planted, and some old shrubs had been removed. "I wonder if Carol did something." Martha frowned. The three of them got out of the taxi and retrieved their luggage. After paying the driver, they headed to the front door. George took out his key from his pocket and inserted it into the door. "That's strange." He noticed the key wouldn't turn. "It doesn't seem to fit." "You're just tired," Martha said. "Let me try." But Martha faced the same result. The key wouldn't turn. "Has the lock been changed?" Diana asked, puzzled. George pressed the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened. But they were greeted not by Buddy or Carol, but by a stranger, a woman. Behind her, 2 curious children peeked out. "Hello," the woman smiled. "Can I help you?" Martha was momentarily speechless. "This is our house." The woman's expression changed. "I'm sorry? We purchased this house last week." "That's impossible." George stepped forward. "There must be some mistake. This has been our home for over 30 years. "Just a moment," the woman said. She turned around and called, "Robert! Could you come here?" A middle-aged man appeared. His expression showed understanding when he saw the confused family. "You must be the Hamilton family," he said quietly. "We are the Wilsons. Last week, we purchased this house from Carol Hamilton." "What?" Martha's voice rose. "That's impossible. She has no right." "According to the legal documents, she did have the right," Robert Wilson said. "All procedures were conducted properly. They passed the lawyer's checks." Diana stood stunned. "Where's Buddy?" she finally managed to ask. "The golden retriever?" Mrs. Wilson answered. "Carol took him. She said he was her dog." The color drained from the 3 faces. "May we see inside the house?" George asked in a trembling voice. The Wilsons exchanged glances and agreed. "Of course. Please do." More shocks awaited as the 3 entered. Some furniture remained, but had been rearranged. New paintings hung on the walls, and all their family photos were gone. Children's toys were scattered on the floor, asserting the presence of the new family. "I can't believe this was our home," Robert Wilson said. "It's a wonderful place. The children love it." Martha walked around the living room. Her cherished porcelain collection was gone. Diana ran upstairs to check her room. Her former room had been transformed into a colorful children's room. George headed to the study. His precious fishing gear and book collection were nowhere to be found. "Where are our belongings?" he asked the Wilson couple. "Carol must have left some message," Mrs. Wilson said. "I think there was something on the kitchen table." The 3 rushed to the kitchen. There was an envelope on the table. Martha opened it to find the address of a storage facility and an invoice for the retrieval fees. And a small card read, "A gift from the abandoned." "What does this mean?" Diana asked in confusion. Martha was at a loss for words. After a long silence, George quietly said, "Because we left her behind." While they stood stunned in the kitchen, the Wilson couple waited uncomfortably in the entrance hall. "Is all this legal?" Martha finally asked. Did she have the right to sell the house? Mr. Wilson took out folded papers from his pocket. "This is a copy of the purchase agreement. Carol Hamilton signed as a joint owner. According to our lawyer, she had full rights." Martha took the paper with trembling hands and turned the pages. Her face paled. "George, this house wasn't just ours. Carol's name is." "My father's will." George sighed. He instructed that Carol's name be added, because she was the most responsible child. The three gathered again in the living room. Martha headed to the master bedroom. Another message card had been left there. "Meet me at the lawyer's office tomorrow at 11. Address attached." "What should we do?" Diana asked with tearful eyes. "Our belongings? Where will we live?" "We'll have to find a hotel for now," George said. He looked exhausted. "Tomorrow, we'll meet with Carol and talk." The Wilson couple offered them water and chairs. "If there's anything we can do," they said. As the three sat in the living room, Diana's smartphone rang. She picked it up and looked at the screen. "It's a message from Carol." Martha and George turned to her. Diana read the message aloud. "Your belongings are in storage. Details about the retrieval fee will come from the lawyer. Buddy is with me. He is fine." The room fell silent. Tears streamed down Martha's face. "What have we done?" she whispered. "How life can change in just 2 weeks." George covered his face with his hands. Diana stared at her smartphone, contemplating a reply to Carol. But she didn't know what to say. "Let's find a hotel," she finally said. "And tomorrow, we'll go see Carol." The three left the house with their luggage. The Wilson couple saw them off apologetically. "Take care," they said. While waiting for a taxi, the three seriously contemplated their actions for the first time in a long while. "I always thought she was responsible," Martha said. "I always thought she would respond to our demands. So we assumed she would never talk back," George said. Diana remained silent. She was thinking about the jealousy she had felt toward her sister, the complex emotions toward Carol, who was always successful and independent. The taxi arrived, and the three loaded their luggage. Finally, they looked back at the house. The new family was watching them from the window. Their home was no longer theirs. "I raised you both in this house," Martha murmured. Diana placed her hand on her mother's shoulder. "We'll find a solution tomorrow." As the taxi drove away, the three gazed at the house through the window. And for the first time, they began to see things from Carol's perspective, always expected, always used, and finally left behind. "She taught us a lesson," George finally said. "And it's a painful one." Martha took out her smartphone from her handbag. She searched for Carol's number, trying to send a message. But she couldn't find the words. No apology could undo what they had done. The taxi headed downtown. Behind them, the house that was no longer theirs grew smaller. And ahead of them lay an uncertain future. "Come, buddy." Carol called out in the spacious backyard. A year had passed, and the golden retriever was a little older but still energetic. He came bounding over to take a ball from Carol's hand. Carol's new home was on the west side of town, with a small but charming garden and a convenient home office for remote work. She had recently established her own real estate consulting company and had just hired her first employee. Breakfast was set on the terrace. Michael came out with coffee. Their relationship had deepened over the past year, and he now often spent weekends at Carol's house. "Are you meeting them today?" he asked quietly. Carol nodded slightly. Lunch. At a cafe downtown. The relationship with her family remained complicated. Since that day, they had learned many things. Her parents and Diana eventually moved to a small apartment in West Hollywood. With some of the funds Carol had sent them from the house sale, they somehow managed to start a new life. Martha found a part-time job at a local flower shop. George began teaching gardening classes at a community college. Diana continued her job at the travel agency, but without the glamorous perks she once had. The first few months were filled with bitter exchanges. But gradually, dialogue began. Martha was the first to send Carol an apologetic message. "I took you for granted. That was wrong." The repair of their relationship progressed slowly. But Carol didn't completely cut them off. She set limits and boundaries. "My life is my own. I won't sacrifice it for your convenience," she made clear. Today's lunch would be the third time all four sat at the same table. "Nervous?" Michael asked. "Not as much as before," Carol answered. "I can see they're learning." She surveyed the backyard. Buddy was lying contentedly in the sun. Her smartphone rang, alerting her to a message from the Wilson family. They occasionally sent photos of the house. Today's photo showed their children playing in the backyard. "The house is wonderful. Thank you," the message read. Carol smiled. In an unexpected way, she had found peace. Her decision had become self-liberating, an opportunity to begin her true life. It was a journey of learning to follow her own choices and prioritize her own happiness. "I'm ready to go," she told Michael. He took Carol's hand. "You are truly a strong woman," Carol answered while stroking Buddy. "I just realized that my life is my own." She closed the door, gave Buddy a final greeting, and headed to the car with Michael. Building a new relationship with her family wouldn't be easy, but she would never be forced to make the same sacrifices as before. She had learned how to set her boundaries and protect them. Sometimes the most important lessons are learned in the most painful ways. And sometimes the best gifts come from those who were abandoned.